Welcome to the channel. Today we're sharing a cheating story you won't believe. If you enjoy it, please like and subscribe. Let's get started. It was a mild February morning when I stepped out into the courtyard. The well-kept grass stood out against the old stone buildings and gravel paths. Being on staff, I was allowed to walk on that soft grass. The sun was already warming up, and a bird sang loudly as I took in the fresh morning air. Most of the students had already left for summer break, and I had just locked up my lab. I had 4 weeks to spend in this quiet, scenic part of rural Montana. Still, it felt like I had just swapped one cage for another. Sure, I could come and go whenever I wanted, people treated me nicely, and I was even having an affair with Anna, the school nurse. But I could never go back to my hometown, and I couldn't marry Anna either. I was bound to end up as a lonely old man with nothing ahead except the sound of that bird's song. Funny enough, it didn't seem to bother the bird as much as it got to me. I was still feeling sorry for myself when a voice came from behind me. Well, if you've got to hide, I can think of worse places to do it. I turned to see a young man leaning against the wall beside the arch I had just walked under. He smiled as he spoke, looking quite pleased with himself. "I'd soon put a stop to that. Are you talking to me? I'm not hiding from anyone. Come off it, Dad. To disappear as effectively as you did, and for it to take more than a year to find you, you had to be hiding. I haven't a clue what you're talking about. Now, unless you're a parent or an employee here, you are trespassing. I suggest you leave and don't come back." I took up my privilege to walk across the grass and made for the arch in the opposite wall. As I walked away, I heard him calling after me, "I'm not going until you talk to me. Dad, we have things to discuss. Leave me alone. I have no children. Just go away." I strode quickly through the cloisters towards my apartment. I could hear him behind me, his footsteps ringing out on the flagstones. I pulled out my key and let myself in, closing the door behind me. He hammered on the door several times before shouting through the mail slot, "You'll have to come out sometime. I'm not going anywhere. I just want to talk to you." I was trembling as I started to make myself some coffee. It had been 5 years or more since ID felt this way. I sat down at my kitchen table and tried to regain my self-control. I heard voices outside and then a key in the door. I turned and was relieved to see Anna Patterson come in, closing the door behind her. I breathed a sigh of relief. She had a puzzled look on her face as she spoke. "Mark, there's a young man sitting outside your door. He claims to be your son. Is there something you haven't told me? He's not my son. He's mistaken. I have no children. I told you that." "Yes, Mark, I know you did, and I believe you. But why does that young man believe he's your son? Why are you so shaken by his presence?" I looked into Anna's beautiful green eyes. She was the one ray of light in a dark 5 years. She was the matron at Highland Ridge School and looked after the physical and emotional well-being of the boys. Many a homesick 12-year-old had found himself sobbing into her ample bosom as he cried for his mom. The older boys would give their right arms for a similar cuddle. Even in her nurse's uniform, she looked lovely to me. Over the last 3 years, we had struck up a relationship and had gotten to the stage where we each had a key for the other's apartment. In fact, the only thing stopping us from sharing a flat was the talk among the boys and the effect it might have on the school if the parents found out. I sat down with my head in my hands. "I am so sorry, Anna. There are things about me you don't know, and that young man is a reminder of a time I'd rather forget. Nevertheless, he is not my son. He may think he is, but he's wrong. So tell me, Mark, why would he think he's your son?" "Because I'm married to his mother." Anna sat down, a shocked look on her face. "Well, that certainly explains a few things. You mean like why I haven't asked you to marry me?" "Yes, that's the reason. I can't marry you or anyone else because I'm still married to her. So divorce her. I can wait. I can't divorce her without revealing my whereabouts. Though that might be academic now. Now I'm really worried, Mark. Have you done something bad? Is that why you don't want to be found?" "I've done nothing that I haven't paid for. But if they find me now, they will put me back in prison." Anna reached out and took my hands down from my face, holding them in hers. "Okay, Mark Johnson. First, you're going to tell me the whole story. Then we are going to get that young man in here and find out what he wants." It all started a little over 5 years ago, or at least that's when I realized what was happening. Maverick Joe, they used to call me. I thought it was just because I shared a surname with the lead character in the movie. I soon found out there was another reason. Just like Joe, I always seemed to get all the jobs. It wasn't always so. I had worked at Bayside Institute for 18 years and always did my fair share of evening and holiday classes, but no more than anyone else. However, shortly after Chris Parker was appointed vice principal, things began to change. At first, I thought my job was under threat because I went from always exceeding my teaching hours to having to offer myself to other divisions just to get close to my minimum. The thing about being below minimum hours was you couldn't refuse any course you were offered. I soon found myself working until 10 p.m. 4 nights a week, not to mention the holiday courses I had to do. My wife, Sophia, was the faculty secretary, and when Chris Parker was promoted, he took her with him so she worked normal office hours. We were becoming like ships that pass in the night. My sex life was in the toilet. I got home at 10:30 p.m. and needed at least an hour to wind down before going to bed. Sophia turned in at 10 and would almost always be asleep when I went to bed. I told Sophia I would quit the college rather than continue to destroy our marriage, but she urged me to be patient and things would work out. Halfway through my second year of such treatment, I finally reached the end of my tether. My subject area was electronics, but I had to deliver mathematics and physics because I was told no demand existed for electronics. I was somewhat surprised when a colleague who ran the general engineering course approached me. "Mark, I've got a little problem. I've got to deliver an electronics unit and I haven't got a clue about the subject. I'm a mechanical man. Give me friction, drag factors, and equilibrium and I'm the man. But this stuff, you can't see it and can't feel it. How do I teach that? I've got a few books on the subject, but I need some advice on how to deliver it and what practical work to give them." "Hang on, Paul. Are you under hours or something?" "Good God, no. I'm into overtime for this. That doesn't make sense. I'm under hours and I'm available. They'll do it for you." Robert Paulson, my head of division, looked up with a surprised look on his face as I strode into his office. "Good morning, Robert. I've come to save you some money. I'm always up for that, Mark. What do we have to do?" "Paul wants someone to deliver the electronics unit in his course. He is over hours. You'll have to pay him overtime. If I do it, you don't have to pay overtime, and he'll be up to minimum hours and won't have to keep accepting holiday work." "Sorry, Jobs, Mark. No can do. But why not? It doesn't make sense, and the students will do better if I teach them." Paul admits he doesn't have a clue. "I'm sorry, Mark, but just like you, I have to do as I'm told." "You mean that somebody has instructed you to keep me under hours?" "I can't say any more, Mark." Full of anger, I stormed into the head of faculty's office. I put the same deal to him and got the same sort of response. It seemed I had enemies in high places. I moved up the chain of command. Sooner or later, I must get to someone who couldn't pass the buck upwards. Sophia was somewhat surprised when I strode through the office and arrived at her boss' door. "You can't just go in, Mark. You have no appointment. He's busy." I walked in and found Chris Parker, our vice principal, sitting at his desk, talking into the telephone. He motioned me to sit down. I sat fuming while he finished his call. Eventually, he put down the phone, shuffled a few papers, then turned to me and smiled. "Now, Mark, what's got you so hot under the collar that you burst in here? Interrupting my phone call? I'm trying to find out who is deliberately keeping me below minimum hours, even when it costs the college money to do so. So far, everything points to you unless you're going to tell me that you are only following orders so that I have to go and talk to the principal. I've no idea what you're talking about, Mark. Why don't you explain it to me?" Chris Parker was a tall, slim man with gray hair and piercing blue eyes. I looked into those eyes as I told him the story, hoping something would tell me that ID got the right man. Not a flicker showed as he told me he was most concerned that the college was spending money it didn't have. When ID finished, he got up, walked around, and opened the door. He looked straight at me. "Well, Mark, thank you for bringing this to my attention. You can rest assured that I will get to the bottom of it as soon as I get back from the Association of Colleges conference." "When will that be, then, Ron?" "Well, I leave tomorrow and I will be in Bozeman for the next 3 days, so it will be Tuesday." "So you'll be down in Bozeman for 3 days? That's near Helena, isn't it?" "Well, I would say that Helena was near Bozeman, but yes, it is nearby." "Why do you ask?" "Oh, nothing really. It's just that my son lives in Helena." Suddenly, everything became clear. Sophia was taking the time off to visit our son in Helena, just a short car ride from the place her boss was staying for the next 3 days. It seemed absurd, but it was certainly an explanation. He made sure I had to work unsocial hours so I wouldn't be home to question where my wife was. "Are you all right, Mark?" Sophia asked as I walked out of the office. I obviously looked as stunned as I felt. I tried to pull myself together. "What? Oh yeah, I'm fine. Just got something on my mind." Is it something I can help with? No, it's work-related. Nothing for you to worry about. That night, I got home to find Sophia packing for her few days away. When I walked into the bedroom, she quickly closed her suitcase. Any other day, I wouldn't have thought much of it, but today it had a new significance. It did puzzle me why she needed to take so many clothes for 3 days with our son and his wife. I did make a comment about the weight of the case as I lifted it off the bed. The next morning, I offered to drive Sophia to the station. Oh, there's no need for that, Mark. I can get a cab. Oh, I insist. Why pay for a taxi when I have the time and a car to drive you? What sort of husband would I be if I didn't make the most of every minute I can spend with my wife? Well, okay then, but you won't be able to go on to the platform. She walked into the other room, taking her phone with her. We shared an uneventful trip to the station. Sophia told me how excited she was about visiting Jacob and Sophie. It's a great shame you couldn't get time off and come with me, Mark. There was hardly a tremor in her voice. I had to admit she was good. These last 3 years, we never seemed to get time off together. Still, all that will change soon. What makes you say that? What have you done? I thought I detected real anxiety. Oh, nothing, but Ron's promised to look into it when he gets back from Bozeman. Hey, it's just occurred to me you'll probably be traveling on the same train. I don't think so, Mark. Anyway, he'll probably be in first class. She started to sound nervous. At the station, I carried her case to the barrier. I'll call you when I get home from work at night. No, don't, Mark. We may go out in the evening. I'll call you. She kissed me goodbye and told me she loved me. I left to go to work. It was going to be a busy few days. I had no problem wiring the bedroom. Just a single webcam was all I needed. Drilling the small hole through to the spare room to accommodate the cable was the biggest part of the job. I used that room as my study, so it was a piece of cake to connect the camera to my Linux box and schedule it to record every evening's activity. Chris Parker's office was a different matter. For a start, I had to gain access, and I didn't have a key. As in most colleges, the cleaners come in early in the morning, so 7 a.m. saw me arriving for work. I made my way to the management offices. As the cleaner finished work, she was about to lock the door as I called out to her. Don't bother to lock the door. I'm here now. Oh, are you Mr. Green? I'm pleased to meet you. It really was that easy. In order to automatically install updates, it was college policy to leave computers running all night. That meant I didn't even have to find a host for the camera. I used a wireless unit and his own desktop to host it using a spare account from a student who had recently left. I hacked into the college servers. Soon, I had a direct stream to my desktop which I could activate remotely. From then on, it was simply a matter of waiting for their return. On Saturday morning, I rang my son at home. There was no answer. I called his work number. Hello, Jacob Johnson. Hello, Jacob. How are you? Oh, hello, Dad. I am fine. How about you? I am grand as usual. Missing your mother, of course. I expected her to answer when I called the house. Come to think of it, why aren't you there? Surely you could get a few days off for your mother's visit? He sounded embarrassed and didn't really want to talk to me. Oh, I did take Thursday and Thursday off, but I had to come in this morning. My boss is delivering a sales pitch on Tuesday, and I've got to make sure he has everything at his fingertips. Yes, I suppose you do. So where's Sophie? Did she have to work as well? No, she's probably gone shopping in Bozeman with Mom. Yes, Bozeman. I might have known she'd end up there. Look, Dad, I've got to get this work done. Why don't you call Mom on her mobile? Yeah, maybe I will. Well, I'd better not stop you working, Jacob. Look after yourself. You too, Dad. Bye. So that was that. He knew and was prepared to give her an alibi. I was sad to think that I'd probably never see or talk to him again. Anna squeezed my hands. So you disowned him? I suppose I can understand that. If he knew what she was doing and kept it from you, I don't think it's right, but I can understand. I was starting to get very tense, and Anna could see it. I sat there, and she held me to her chest. I was certainly glad to have her with me. Looking down at those gorgeous jugs was some compensation for my world falling apart again. It took a few minutes for me to recover my composure. So you collected the evidence and got a divorce. They don't put you in prison for that, do they? No, Anna, they don't. And if that's all I'd done, I would have been okay. I'm afraid I went further than that. You probably won't like me much when you find out. I think you'll be the judge of that, Mark. Now, why don't you tell me the rest of the story before we call him in to see what he wants? When Sophia came home on Tuesday, I did my best to act normally. To be honest, it wasn't difficult. We hardly ever had sex because she was always too tired. During the week, we hardly saw each other anyway. On Tuesday evening, I checked the live stream from Chris Parker's office. Sure enough, as soon as most people had left, Sophia joined him. They started hugging and kissing, and his hands were on her ass by the time I went to teach my class. During break, I checked again just in time to see Sophia bent over his desk with no skirt or panties, being screwed. By the end of classes, they had gone, and the office was dark. The following day, they left on time, so there was nothing to check. However, my bedroom camera picked up significant action. It also raised questions. Why did Sophia never tell me she liked to be screwed while tied to the bed? God knows I would have done that for her. I would have been a lot more adventurous than Chris Parker. Hell, he didn't even use a blindfold. Thursday, they were at it in the office again. No wonder I didn't get any sex. Even if she'd been awake, she would have been worn out. I'm ashamed to say I let it go on another 2 weeks to see if there was a pattern. I didn't just want a divorce. I wanted to hurt them the way they had hurt me. I was running on autopilot. The only thing that kept me going to work every day was my anger. People at work commented on how snappy I'd become. Students asked what had happened to my famous sense of humor. The lovers, of course, noticed nothing. By the end of the second week, I knew what I was going to do. I knew next Thursday evening would be an office sex session, so I put a plan into action. No one was surprised to see Maverick Joe working at the Holiday, so no questions were asked when I turned up. I used a library computer and another redundant account to set up a website with the name of Office Antics. It had video streaming facilities, and I set up links to various adult sites to make it look authentic. Then I produced the posters for the notice boards around the college. www.officeantics.com goes live 6 p.m. on Thursday. Don't miss it. This week, for a limited time only, this site goes live. Be among the first to witness this amazing content. As the notices were taken down, I replaced them. I even managed to get them up on library and church notice boards around the town. Come Thursday, I was ready. At 5:30, I added the finishing touch to the website and dubbed over the top of the video display. It read, "Tonight's content comes to you live from Bayside Institute." At 5:55 p.m., I checked the live stream. Green had started unbuttoning Sophia's blouse. I went off to my lesson, which was conveniently a computer class. After the first 5 minutes, it was clear we would get no work done. First, the whispers started. Then, as they got more excited, the volume rose so that I could hear every word. "It's coming from this college. Hey, I recognize him. He's the vice principal. He teaches one of my math classes. Who's the woman he's screwing? She's got a great pair of jugs on her. I know her. She's his secretary. Look, she's giving him a blowjob. I'm emailing my friends. They can't miss this." Up to that point, I had been somewhat ambivalent about the responses. On one hand, I was happy to expose the pair of them for the liars they were. On the other, he was screwing my wife, the woman I loved for more than 20 years. It was that love that made me forgive her so much in the past, but not this time. My lesson had already fallen apart, but then came the comment that pushed me over the top. "Oh my God. He's screwing her on his desk. You dirty scum sucker." My rage was released. Without really thinking about what I was doing, I left my class and hurried to the admin block. I couldn't believe they had been so complacent they hadn't even locked the door. I charged into the office, grabbing Green by the hair. I wrenched him off my wife and slammed his forehead against the edge of the open door. He fell to the floor, where I started kicking him first in the balls, and then as he rolled over, the kicks landed in the stomach and chest. I was in a rage. My anger was with both of them, but 20 years of love and an upbringing that said it was wrong to hit women meant that Green got it all. I was conscious of Sophia screaming at me to stop. It was only when she threw herself on top of him that I did indeed stop. I stepped back, shocked at what I had done. As I walked backward, I came to a chair and fell down onto it. Sophia looked up at me and realized that it was safe to get up. Still half naked, she ran into her outer office and returned with her phone. I heard her talking. "Ambulance," she said. "There has been an accident and I think a man is badly injured. Better call the police." "Ray, half the world knows it wasn't an accident. You might also consider getting dressed." "What do you mean, half the world knows? How could they? Your antics tonight have been broadcast on the internet, and so has my attack on Green here. In fact, it's still going out. So get dressed and call the police." "Oh, Mark, you haven't." One look at my face told her I had. She ran around the office, picking up her clothes and putting them on. As soon as she had covered herself, she called the police. She paced back and forth in the office before turning back to me. How clear were the pictures, Mark? Could you see who we were? Well, my class recognized him immediately. They didn't know who you were, but I guess they do now. She put her hands to her face. Oh God, Mark, what are we going to do? Well, I'm going to sit here and wait for the police. Perhaps you'd better go to the hospital with lover boy here. It wasn't love, Mark. Just sex. Exciting sex because we were doing things we shouldn't. But just sex all the same. It doesn't matter anymore, Ray. You wanted or needed someone else, so now you don't have to sneak around. I'm going to be out of circulation for some time. You'll be free to screw who you like. She sat with her head in her hands, crying. The paramedics arrived first and started to treat Green. Sophia had to decide whether to go to the hospital with him or not. When the police arrived and I was led away in handcuffs, it took the police a day to decide to charge me with grievous bodily harm. Within 2 days, I was in court being formally charged. I had opted for the duty solicitor, and he tried to get me released on bail. I instructed him not to do so, but he felt he had to do his best for me. The magistrate asked if I could post bail. Your Honor, I have little money. My parents are both dead, and am not in contact with my wife, nor do I wish to be. I can't see any way I can raise enough money to post bail. He gave me a searching look. You realize, Mr. Johnson, without someone to post bail, I will have to remand you in custody. Would you like more time so that you can speak to your wife? No, sir. Custody is fine. I was on remand for 2 months. I got frequent visits from my solicitor trying to convince me to plead not guilty due to temporary insanity. I had several requests from Sophia for a visiting order so she could come and see me. I refused. My solicitor told me under British law a wife cannot be forced to give evidence against her husband, and Sophia had refused. Of course, it had gone out over the internet, so there would be plenty of other witnesses. When you're in prison, it's surprising what you find funny. I got a letter from the College Human Resource Division informing me that I was the subject of a disciplinary hearing and asking who I wanted to represent my interests. I found it amusing that even in the face of overwhelming evidence, they still had to go through their procedure. I wrote back saying I was offering no defense. The next communication from them told me I'd been fired and all about the appeals procedure. Unable to get in to see me, Sophia also resorted to writing letters. My dearest Mark, I have no idea how to apologize for what I've done to you. Please believe I didn't do it to hurt you, nor did love have anything to do with it. I can't explain why I did what I did, but I have to tell you that you are and always have been my one and only love. I know you have been dismissed by the college. They are waiting for Ron to get out of the hospital before they hold his disciplinary hearing. He has several broken ribs and had a collapsed lung. The doctors aren't sure whether he will be infertile. I've told him he'll tell the principal that he used his position to force me to have sex with him unless he withdraws all charges and refuses to give evidence. I will do it, my love. I'll do anything to get you out of that place so that I can start to make amends for what I have done to you. No matter how long it takes, I will wait for you, my love, and I hope that one day you may be able to forgive me. All my love, Sophia. I screwed it up and threw it away. A month later, she wrote again. My dearest Mark, I am so sorry, not just for what I've done to you, but also because I failed to persuade Ron to drop the charges. He didn't believe I would do what I said. He was wrong. I went with my union rep to see the principal. I told him Ron had pressured me into having sex with him and made sure you were always out of the way when we met. I don't know if he believed me, but it didn't matter. The union started a sexual harassment action. Both Ron and I were dismissed. Sad to say, that has made Ron more determined to ensure you go to prison. I'm so sorry, my love. I tried my best. Your solicitor says you refuse to consider the only defense that might work. Please reconsider, my love. You don't deserve to be in that place. You did what you did because we drove you to it. I will always love you and will wait as long as it takes. All my love, Sophia. I have to admit I was surprised they'd fired Green. I expected the management to close ranks around him, but Sophia had given them no choice. My trial was almost a non-event. My barrister tried to persuade me to use the temporary insanity plea, but once again I refused. I insisted I would plead guilty. I was happy for him to use extreme provocation and mitigation. My guilty plea meant the prosecution didn't have to offer any evidence other than the extent of Chris Parker's injuries. They did this using photographs and medical reports. He was peeved that he wasn't asked to tell the court his side of the story. Sophia and Jacob were there. She was crying most of the time, and he was trying to comfort her. The judge listened to my barrister's pleas of mitigation before turning his attention to me. Mr. Johnson, your counsel has made a very good case that you were acting while the balance of your mind was disturbed. I take it the option to use that as a defense has been mentioned to you. Yes, sir, it has. Do you wish to change your plea? No, sir. I committed the crimes and I am willing to take my punishment. Very well. Mark Johnson, you have pleaded guilty to the charge that you assaulted Mr. Chris Parker, causing him grievous bodily harm. This is a very serious offense and one for which I could hand down a sentence of up to 10 years in prison. However, your counsel has made a good case for extreme provocation in that Mr. Green was abusing his power to keep you out of the way so he could have sex with your wife. I find this to be the sort of provocation few men could resist. Even given this situation, I would still be bound to sentence you to 5 years in prison. However, at the point of your arrest, you pleaded guilty to the charges, saving the taxpayers significant expense and saving your victim the trauma of reliving the attack. Under the guidelines given to me, I can therefore have the sentence. Mr. Johnson, I sentence you to spend 3.5 years in prison. I looked at the public gallery. Green was punching the air as if he had won some sort of victory. Sophia just gasped and buried her head in her hands. As the guards took me down to the cells, my barrister came to my cell after the trial. Well, Mr. Johnson, I still think I could have got you off, but 3.5 years is a good result. If you keep your nose clean, you could be out in 1.5 years. I suppose I should thank you for that, but to tell you the truth, I'm not sure I want to get out. What have I got to come out to? My family is destroyed. My career is in the toilet. I don't really care when I get out. Why didn't you tell me any of this before? Mark? It seems almost as if I don't know you at all. Would I have got this job if they'd known I had a criminal record? Of course not. Most people here wouldn't even talk to me if they knew. Would you have let me get close to you? Aren't you already wondering how you can dump me? If that is what you think, perhaps I should dump you, as you put it. I'm having a great deal of difficulty believing the man I know, the man I fell in love with, could do such a thing. From what you said, the violence was a split-second reaction, which given the circumstances I can understand. It's the cold-blooded planning of your wife's total humiliation that I can't believe. The man you fell in love with wouldn't have done that. I am the man, you know, at least I am now. Maybe the judge and the barrister were right. Maybe the balance of my mind was disturbed. I couldn't believe she would rip my heart out again. But Green was the guy I wanted. He made me a laughingstock. They even called me Maverick Joe because I got all the jobs. Some of the others must have known it was so he could keep screwing my wife. In my head, I was hitting back at him and the college. Let's see them deny a live broadcast. I thought it even went out through college servers so they couldn't pretend it came from elsewhere. Sophia was just collateral damage. To my surprise, Anna pulled my head back down to her chest and held it there as I cried, reliving that fateful day. She lifted my head again and looked at me. Mark, you said you didn't think she could rip your heart out again. Had you caught Sophia cheating on you before? I didn't catch her, no. She thinks I don't know. But it wasn't the first time she's done it. At least once before, shortly after we were married. If you didn't catch her, how can you be so sure? I've seen the evidence. Believe me, I'm sure. Just a minute, Mark. If you've been in prison, how did you get this job? I mean, you need a clear criminal records check. I laughed. If people knew just how easy it is to get around those things, they wouldn't value them so highly. You would be amazed at how many Mark Johnsons there are with clean records. I just had to become one of them. We both sat holding each other. I was relieved she hadn't left me. ID lied my way into everything since ID left, and I hadn't been able to tell Anna the truth. Several times ID come close, but each time discretion got the better of my valor. I wanted to tell her, and if ID been able to marry her, I would have. As it was, it didn't seem to be worth the risk of the information getting out. Anna took her arm from around my shoulders and held both my hands in hers. Mark, you know we are going to have to speak to the young man outside. Now he has found you, the game is up. Unless, that is, we can persuade him to keep his mouth shut. Now I'm going to call him in, then you are going to talk to him. Please, Mark, please talk to him. She got up and walked to the door. When she came back, Jacob followed her in. Jacob was a good-looking young man, standing 6 feet tall with broad shoulders and an athletic build. He had light brown hair, which in the summer sun became almost blonde. He had a square jaw with a cleft chin, and his blue eyes sparkled when he smiled. A look at Anna's face told me she was impressed. She looked at me, looked at him, and then back at me. Your wife must be a good-looking woman, Mark. He certainly doesn't take after you. I mean, I think you're quite a hunk. But Jacob here must be every girl's dream. Jacob smiled at her. He'll settle for being Sophie's dream, thank you. Well, Jacob, you and Mark must have a lot to talk about. I'm going to make some coffee. Would you like some? Jacob accepted the offer of coffee, and Anna went off to the kitchen, leaving us alone for about a minute. We sat in silence. Jacob was fidgeting while he watched me, unsure of how to start. I had no intention of making it any easier for him. I just relaxed on the sofa and waited. Eventually, he spoke. Why did you do it, Dad? Come off it, Jacob. You and half the world know why I did it. I'm not talking about that. Why did you disappear like that? You knew she was waiting for you. When you didn't reply to any of her letters, she tried to get the governor to keep her informed and tell her when you would be released. We thought you had another 3 months to go when the police came and told us you were out. The prison gave Mom the address of the hostel you went to. I went there, but you were long gone. Why go to a hostel when you could have come home? Why risk going back to prison by just disappearing from the hostel? I don't know what she's told you about what I did and why, but even from what was reported, you must realize there was no way I could go back. What, not even for a few weeks, Dad? Do you really hate Mom so much that you would rather go to a bail hostel than go home to your own bed? Even if it was only while you got back on your feet? She and her lover spent 3 years manipulating me. I wasn't going to give her another chance. You should have read her letters. She wanted to try to make it up to you. She knows how much she hurt you. She wanted to try to put things right. I've had enough of this, Jacob. You didn't search for me just to ask why I didn't go home. What is it you want from me? What happens if you don't get it? Are you going to tell the police where I am so they can put me back in prison? I want you to come back and talk to her. She's ill, Dad. Very ill. She was okay when she thought you would come back. But when you disappeared, she hit the bottle. Now she has cirrhosis of the liver and needs a transplant. They won't do that while she is still drinking. I hate what she did to you, Dad. But she's the only mom I've got. I can't see her killing herself like this. I need you to tell her you forgive her. Tell her to stop the drinking. Or what, Jacob? What happens if I don't go with you? Do I need to move on before the police come after me for breaking my parole conditions? Nothing, Dad. I don't want to see you back in that place, and I don't think the police are interested. When I asked them to help me find you, they just said they would find you when you committed another crime. Anna came in with the coffee. Sounds like Jacob is talking sense here, Mark. You need closure, and if that helps your wife, then so much the better. I know you don't really wish her any harm. How do you know? Because you beat him to a pulp but never laid a finger on her. I sat for a minute. I never thought about it before, but she was right. I wouldn't have dreamed of hurting Sophia in spite of her cheating. What harm can it do to talk to her, Mark? So now it was 2 against 1 and I was losing. Okay, I'll go and talk to her. But don't expect anything to change. She'll have to accept the fact that I'm not coming back. I'll talk to her on one condition, I said, turning to Jacob. You stop calling me Dad. He just sat shaking his head. One mistake 3.5 years ago and he disowns me. What the hell can I do? Give him time, Jacob. I'm sure he'll come around. You don't know him. I let him down. I know I did. And now he'll never forgive me or Mom. We left the next morning, all 3 of us. Jacob didn't want Anna to come because he didn't want Sophia to know I had found someone else. I insisted that she should come with us. I wanted everything out in the open. He tried to make conversation on the journey, but it was an uphill struggle for Jacob. I didn't intentionally ignore him. My mind was too occupied for any talking. All the time, I was reliving those days running up to the main event and my assault on Green. Felt strange pulling into the drive of my old house. If I didn't know better, I would have sworn it was empty. The grass needed cutting. The curtains hung loosely at the windows, which were in dire need of cleaning. Jacob had his own key and let us in through the front door. I had never seen my house in such a mess. He led us into the living room and asked us to sit down. He went upstairs to fetch his mother. He took quite some time to come down with her. When Sophia came in, I barely recognized her. Her face was gaunt, and her skin had a yellowish tinge to it. She had lost a lot of weight, and the dress she wore just hung on her. When she saw me, she tried to smile and held her arms out to me. Mark, you've come home. No, Ray, I've come to talk to you. I'm not coming home ever. Anna squeezed my hand and looked lovingly at me, which made Sophia look uncomfortable. Jacob helped her to her seat. "I'd like to say you were looking well, Ray, but you must know that's not true. Same old Mark. Can't lie to save your life. They told me that's why you ended up in prison. Water under the bridge, Ray. All finished with now. Jacob says you want to talk to me, so why not just say what you have to say?" She paused and then started again. "It's not enough, but I am sorry for what I did to you. I've tried to understand why I did it because I really do love you. I suppose that must be difficult to believe. You see, I've always been able to compartmentalize my life, almost as if I had more than one life. In the compartment with Chris Parker, you only existed as a sort of abstract concept, a sort of notional husband. In your compartment, he was just a faceless person who was your boss. When I was with him, I'm sorry to say I never thought of you. When you and I were together, I never thought about him. Of course, there was a sort of in-between time when I balanced the two, and that was the only time I felt guilty about what I did to you. I felt guilty, Mark. Really, I did. But it was such a turn-on. The man had power over you and me. They say power is an aphrodisiac, and it is. He had the power to make me available for him by ensuring you were always out of the way. The fact that he wanted me was enough. I said he used his position to force me into it, but he didn't have to force me. I just said that to try to get him to drop the assault charges. So there was no love there then? None at all, Mark. It was just sex and the excitement of doing things I shouldn't with a man with power. So why did you lay on top of him to protect him from me? That was to protect you from yourself. I've never seen you like that. I thought you were going to kill him. I didn't know you were streaming it out to the internet. I thought if he wasn't too badly injured, we could say he had an accident. You took a hell of a risk. I might have hurt you too. No, you couldn't do that, Mark. Not you. No matter what state you were in, you wouldn't hurt me. Green would never have said it was an accident if I was the only witness. He wouldn't have had much choice. But you had to send it out on the internet. Why did you do that? Did you hate me that much? I realized most of the college management must have known what was happening. I wanted to make sure Green and the rest of them couldn't wriggle out of it, so I made sure there were plenty of witnesses. They couldn't deny it happened once the video went out on the internet. I wasn't aiming to hurt you, but at the time I didn't really care if I did. I didn't intend to attack him. I just sort of lost it. Well, if you wanted to hurt the college management, you certainly succeeded. Even the head of IT services got fired. The college was taken over by Northgate College. You should have read my letters, Mark. You destroyed them all. I couldn't get a job either. I had to go temping just to make ends meet. All of a sudden, Jacob joined the conversation. Perhaps Dad wouldn't have lost it if it was the first time you cheated on him. But you'd already done it before when you screwed my father. Sophia snapped back at him with a force she didn't look capable of. Don't you ever call that scum-sucker your father. He was just a man who was happy to get his end away but ran a mile when he found I was pregnant. Things got very tense in our marriage at the time due to our failure to have children. When I met Peter, I was easy prey for anyone who could offer a friendly shoulder. He offered me sympathy and made me think Mark didn't really want children. He gradually worked his way into my pants. I thought I loved Peter and I thought he loved me, but I was wrong on both counts. When I became pregnant, I thought he'd be pleased and leave the wife he said he didn't love. Instead, he wanted me to pass you off as Mark's child and carry on as before. I realized he didn't love me. I was just a bit on the side for him. I told him I never wanted to see him again, and I never did. I'm glad he died because then he'd never try to claim you as his. When I told your father, Mark, your real father, he was overjoyed and couldn't wait to be a daddy. I had no idea that he knew. Jacob was left in limbo, and I have to say I felt sorry for him. However, I still found it difficult to forgive him, not for being someone else's son, but for colluding with his mother to deceive me. Emotions were running high, and it was getting too much for me. I had to bring it to an end. So, Ray, you wanted to see me, and now you have. Where do we go from here? You must realize there is no way back for us. I suppose you're right, Mark. I had hoped I could make it up to you, but I can see that's a tall order. I wonder, could we possibly be friends? That depends on you, Ray. I don't have many drunks as friends. They'll get cleaned up, Mark. I will. I've got a place on a residential program to get dried out. If I stay off the booze for 6 months, they'll consider me for a liver transplant. Do you think you'll manage it? They'll try, Mark, especially if we can be friends. I know you don't feel you can come and see me, but can I write to you? Will you read my letters? You write them and he'll read them, Ray. I can't promise anymore. We wound things up, and I got back in the car for the long drive home. At first, it was a quiet ride. Anna repeatedly squeezed my leg or pressed her face to my arm. When we pulled into a motorway service center, we started to chat. It was small talk at first while we decided whether or not to eat there. When we decided we would and sat down, Anna decided to get to the point. Do I know everything now, Mark? Or is there any more to come out? Only what happened in prison. I haven't told anyone about that, and I probably never will. She reached out and squeezed my hand. Was it really that awful? I did things in there I was pleased about, but I also had to do things I wouldn't normally have dreamed of. However, my life was a lot better than many. Do you think you will ever be friends with Sophia? I don't know. He'll try. That's as much as I can say right now. What about Jacob? You dropped quite a bombshell on him today. The ball is in his court now that he knows the truth. It's up to him to decide what he wants to do. Anna reached across and took both of my hands in hers. You know you made me very proud of you today. Don't you? Well, I do now. I smiled at her. Do I get a reward? I say there is a very good chance, she said with a grin. We finished our meal and walked back to the car with our arms around each other. I was indeed rewarded that night and for many of the following nights. Sophia's first letter arrived after her first week in the rehab center. She found it difficult to live without alcohol but expressed a determination to see it through. She couldn't resist some words of apology but made no further attempt to persuade me to go back to her. I was impressed and wrote back offering encouragement. For 3 months we exchanged letters, each one more cordial than the previous one. I began to believe we could be friends. She got out of rehab, gained a bit of weight, and found herself a job. She still had health issues and was still on the list for a transplant. I was hopeful for her recovery. It came as a surprise when the correspondence came to an end. Things had seemed to be going well, and then she didn't reply to my letters. I was surprised at how it affected me. I felt she had let me down again. Anna tried to keep my spirits up. She told me there was probably a good reason for it and she would be back in touch sooner or later. The first snow of winter came on the first day of January. By the following holiday, we had 2 inches of white stuff covering the landscape. The estate staff had cleared the paths, but the grass and all the surrounding landscape changed to the sort of view you see on Christmas cards. I had finished my Saturday morning classes. Walking out into the quad, I was taken completely by surprise. Jacob was leaning against the wall of the arch and greeted me as I came out of the lab. Well, Dad, even in the winter, it still looks beautiful. One hell of a place to hide out. Jacob, you know the whole story now, so you know we are not related. Look, I know what you said, but Mom was right. It doesn't matter whose sperm did the job. You are the only father I have ever known, and I think you did a damn good job. So no matter what you say, I will always think of you as my dad, and am sorry I let you down. I put my arm around his shoulders. For what it's worth, you're still the best son I ever had. We started to walk down the path towards the cloisters. Sophia hasn't written for a while. How is she? Jacob stopped and put his hand on my forearm. She's dead. She died last Saturday of multiple organ failure. They thought it was a urinary tract infection, but then her kidneys packed up. While they were trying to stimulate them, her heart stopped. After the first heart attack, she signed a do not resuscitate agreement. She couldn't face a lifetime on dialysis, and they wouldn't do her liver unless they could find a kidney as well. I stopped and looked at him. I saw the tears coming to his eyes as I felt them welling up in mine. There were no barriers between us now. We threw our arms around each other and openly wept. We stood for several minutes locked in an embrace, our bodies shaking as we sobbed. I fought back the tears as I pulled away from him and dried my eyes with a tissue. Why didn't she tell me? She didn't have to die alone. She wasn't alone, Dad. I was with her. So why didn't you call me? She knew I'd forgiven her. I would have come if you'd called me. That's why she wouldn't let me tell you. The reason the letter stopped is because someone let the papers know she was writing to you. She got a visit from a reporter. With the anniversary of the event coming up, he wanted to find you. Mom was determined that she wouldn't be the cause of any more misery for you. She knew you couldn't be a teacher with a criminal record, so either the school hadn't checked or you had obtained one by fraud. If that got out, you'd be finished again. She wouldn't let it happen and told me I was not to contact you. After all this time, they are still stirring it up. Are you sure? Oh yes, I'm sure. The slimy scumsucker sought me out as well. Tried to tell me he wanted to tell your side of the story. Mom told me it would only be bad for you. I know it's hard to believe after what she did, but she really did love you. You're right. It is hard, but I am grateful for yours and her consideration. I did love her. After all those years, I can't just turn that off. When's the funeral? Tuesday, but don't even think of turning up. You can't take the risk. If you're not there, our friendly reporter may just give up. I put my arm around his shoulders as we turned and walked back towards my flat. Come on, son. Let's see if Anna can rustle up some lunch for you. I think we're way ahead of you there, Dad. Sophie and I got here about 10. She and Anna have been working on lunch for a while. They went shopping about 10:30. We reached my front door, and I led us into an empty flat. I got a beer for Jacob and myself. We sat on the sofa drinking while waiting for the girls to get back. So, Dad, what happens to us now? Mom was the only link between us, yet she's gone. What happens now? Am I ever going to see you again? Don't get me wrong, Jacob. Anna didn't imagine Sophia was going to die, but she asked me a similar question on the way back from our visit. We may not share the same DNA, but I always thought of you as my son and loved you like my own. As I said before, all those years of love can't be turned off, but it had to be your decision. So the question is, Jacob, what do you want to happen? He sat and sipped his beer. I don't want anything to happen. I want Mom's death to change nothing. Like she said, you are my real father. I will always think of you as my dad, and I want you to always think of me as your son. If that's what you want, then that's the way it'll be, I said as I put my arm around him. We both struggled to keep the tears from our eyes as we held each other. We were still locked in an embrace when the door opened and Anna came in. Well, it looks like you boys have come to your senses. Jacob and I parted. I got up to help with the shopping. Sophie followed Anna into the flat. She saw me, let out a scream, and ran towards me. Oh, Mark, it's so good to see you. It's been a long time. Far too long. She stepped back and looked at me. You're looking very well. This place must agree with you. I looked her up and down. My son certainly had good taste. She had shoulder-length honey-blonde hair, blue eyes, plump lips, and high cheekbones. Then I remembered, and as my gaze moved down, I saw the reason her normally trim figure now had a prominent bulge in the front. I see you've noticed Mark Jr., isn't it great? I smiled. Mark Jr.? Are you serious? If you don't mind, Jacob wanted it, and I agree. We love you, Mark. Jacob was heartbroken about what happened to you. He loved Sophia too, so what happened tore him apart. As soon as we found out we were having a boy, Jacob wanted to name him after you. Please say it's all right with you. What could I say? It was fine by me. The three of us sat down to chat while Anna prepared the lunch. The atmosphere at the table was strained, a sweet and sour affair. The tears of joy at the reunion of our family mixed with the tears of sadness at Sophia's passing. I found it hard not to be able to attend her funeral, but her reasons were sound. For the first time since that fateful night, I came to realize I had forgiven her. I still couldn't understand why she did it, but I had to accept in some strange way she did love me. Perhaps if I didn't turn up to the funeral, the press would leave me alone. Anna certainly thought so because she started making arrangements for Christmas. Jacob, I'm sorry, but I really hoped Mark would spend Christmas with me and my daughters. What I would like is to come to you for New Year. It would be like a new beginning for us all. Sophie was overjoyed. Anna, I think that's a great idea. We can have my parents for Christmas and then you and Mark for New Year. Jacob moved on to practical subjects. The house is all yours now. You need to give some thought to what you're going to do with it. Then, of course, there's the money. Money? What money? I thought she was broke. The union launched an action against the college for sexual harassment. They settled out of court for $60,000. She wouldn't touch the money because she knew it was a lie, but once she started the action, she couldn't back down. She had intended to give you the money when you got out of prison to help you get back on your feet. I can't deal with that now, Jacob. They'll have to think about it. We did spend Christmas with Anna's daughters, and I was made very welcome. Both were pleased their mother had found someone. We got to Helena late New Year's Eve morning. I talked to Jacob about the house and the money. We agreed he would handle the letting of the house. I had rented a flat on a short-term contract just long enough to get a utility bill so I could set up a bank account. As soon as the account was set up, I gave up the flat and did everything through the internet. Jacob said he would get the solicitor to transfer the funds to my new account. You know, Jacob, just like your mother, I don't want the money. It's tainted. Well, someone has to have it, Dad, unless you want the bankers to have it. Anna and I have been talking. We want you to set up a trust fund for the education of Mark Jr. and any other children you might have. When you've done that, it'll transfer all the cash into it. Something good has to come out of that mess. If that's what you want, Dad, it'll do it. Pay the income from the house into the new account, and I can take it out in cash. Well, if you're careful, that should keep your whereabouts secure. That night, we all went out to a New Year party. Around midnight, we had the obligatory countdown and the toast to the new year. When the cheering died down, I looked at my little party and filled their glasses before proposing another toast. Ladies and gentlemen, I give you new beginnings. We all raised our glasses in the toast. As we put them down, I walked around and knelt on one knee in front of Anna. Anna Patterson, would you do me the honor of becoming my wife? Anna threw her arms around my neck. Oh yes, Mark. Yes, yes, yes. I put the engagement ring on her finger. It was a perfect fit, and so were we. As she sat looking at the chip of diamond, I stood up. I had the best feeling I'd had in more than 7 years. Truly was a new beginning. Mark's story raises the question, can true forgiveness exist after betrayal? Share your thoughts and subscribe for more.